What is up, greedy guts? It's your boy, Big Umami, and I'm streaming from a hotel room, as you can see, which looks much nicer than my usual studio setup, but neither here or there. Today we're going to be talking about samples, where to find them, how to use them, can you use them, are you going to go to jail for copyright infringement? I don't know, let's find out. So before we even start, no, we're not going to make any music today, we're just going to talk about samples, and I'm going to give out all the links to the main resources I've been using for 15 years or so as a sample-based producer. And hopefully, even if I'm not making any music today, you'll find great value in this video, which in turn will help you make great music. So let's start by dividing samples by categories. The first big one is copyright protected versus copyright free material. And this is pretty simple. Copyright protected samples are usually snippets from musical pieces that have been, commercially released. And this is the case when you take, say, samples from a vinyl, a CD, Spotify or whatever. And in this case, if you use them, you have to sort out some type of licensing contract between you and the original composer or composers. That also usually entails some type of down payment plus, split on the revenue from your royalties and so on and so forth. And you do this by contacting the label or labels that own the actual recording that you've sampled, or maybe you use a third-party broker, but more on this later. Copyright-free material, on the other hand, can be used without striking any kind of monetary deal between the two parties. And in the case of Creative Commons licensing, sometimes you have to credit the author of the original recording, but Creative Commons is actually a pretty complex and vast system that has a different type of licensing. So I'm gonna leave some links in the description box below so that you can read about it and study. The second category is free versus paid samples. This is entirely different from licensing and copyright. It simply means that for paid samples, you have to pay in order to download the sample or the sample pack. And with free samples, you just, maybe register and click on the download button, and that's it. So let me repeat this because it's very important. Paying on a per download basis is not the same thing as sorting out a licensing deal between you and the original creator of the record that you're sampling. For example, you can have paid copyright protected material and you can have free and copyright-free materials and everything in between. I hope that makes sense. So I guess this is a good way to categorize samples for the purposes of this video. So let's create 4 categories now. Number 1, paid and copyright protected. Number 2, free but copyright protected. Number 3, paid and copyright free. And number 4, free and copyright free. So let's start with category 1, which is paid copyright protected samples. And let's start with the OG sampling method, which is of course crate digging. And what can I say about this that hasn't been said before? It's as simple as going to a record store and go through crates and crates of vinyls, tapes, CDs and whatnot, hoping to find a hidden gem somewhere. And sometimes you do find something, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you spend $1 on one record that has 4 great samples, and sometimes you spend $100 on 20 albums that have nothing for you. And that's one of the downsides of this method, but it's also the beauty of it, because there's no greater feeling than coming back home, turning the record player on, you hear the crackle and boom, all of a sudden there's a great drum break, or maybe some Rhodes or a guitar, and before you know it, you're slicing it and you're bobbing your head to it, and it's just magical. And when you don't find hidden gems, well, the real treasure is the friends that you made along the way. I know it's a stupid joke, but not really, because going to the record store is a lot of fun, and sometimes especially after COVID, it's good to get out of the house. Anyway, the licensing on this old school method is a problem because, again, you have to contact the record label that actually owns the copyrighted material, and good luck doing that, especially when it comes to old records. Sometimes, labels just pop up, they're in business for a few years and then they die, and then no one knows who buys them, and it's a mess. And that's why services like Tracklib are so good. Speaking of which, the undisputed king of this type of sampled material is Tracklib. And no, I'm not sponsored by them, but it is truly a great service to find full albums that you know are going to be available for licensing. So before I was talking about third-party brokers, that's exactly what Tracklib is. You pay a monthly fee and then you can download full songs or stems in high quality that you know that are guaranteed to be available for licensing later on. So after you pay the fee, you can download a certain number of samples that you can use in your productions, and then when it's time to actually release your songs, you can strike out a deal with the original owner of that record. And they have three types of licensing deals: A, B and C, with C being the cheapest one and A, B the A-list ones. The A category is mostly songs that are very famous and have been used before in other productions. But this categorization A to C entirely depends on what kind of deal Tracklib actually has struck with the original owners. So sometimes, if you're lucky, you can find some really good songs for cheap. Also, the split of the royalties entirely depends on how long of a sample you use in your production. So pros and cons. Cons is that sometimes it can be quite expensive. The pros is that the process is very streamlined and you're guaranteed to have full legal access to copyrighted material. And somewhere in between, vinyl digging and online licensing, we find the ample samples. They are professional sample clearers, if that's even a word. It basically means that they provide copyright clearance services. So if you found some crazy tune on a vinyl and you use it in your production and then you want to release it, you can contact them and, tell them all about the record and where it comes from and everything, and they will try to sort out some sort of licensing for you. And they have a very good track record of doing so. In fact, they've been used by Sony, Atlantic, Def Jam and many more. I've personally never used their service, but I've heard very good things about it. Also, there are many musicians that actually make entire albums with licensing in mind. And the best place to find these albums, to me, is the Drum Broker. The Drum Broker is a website, label, online shop kind of. It does a lot of things. The prominent artists from Drum Broker being MTK, aka Matthew Crabtree, who was sampled extensively by many great artists like Eminem, Royce the 5'9", Timbaland, and of course the god himself, Mr. Madlib. Alright, let's move to category number 2. Free but copyrighted material. And this is where the digital world truly is your oyster. Let's start with a website that I've been using for years, Radio. In the interest of full transparency, I have to say they haven't sponsored this video, but in the past I've actually made a radio challenge on Instagram, maybe 2 years ago, and it went quite well. Basically, I challenged people to use that platform to find tunes to sample from. It went so well, in fact, they actually gave me a free premium account. So, in the interest of full transparency, I just have to say that. But yeah, I love this app. When you get there, you're presented with a map of the world, as well as all the decades from 1900s to, 2010s. And you can pick and choose countries and decades, and the platform will spit out, songs for you at random. And you can find some absolute treasures on there. So this is a user-based platform, which means that there's so many crate diggers from all around the world, and they find, samples on vinyls and cassettes and stuff, and they upload it onto the platform. So yeah, I've used this source many times in the past, but I've never tried to actually clear any samples off it. I mainly use it for, practice and fun. Another great source for these type of samples, and this should come as no surprise whatsoever, is this one you're watching me on right now. It's YouTube. As you might already know, there's so many incredible channels who regularly upload obscure vinyl rips and great music from all around the world. And you might want to pay close attention to the tip I'm about to give, because this was a game changer for me. Basically, what you need to do is to create a blank Google account, which you're only gonna use for crate digging. You go onto YouTube and you start subscribing to these channels that just do that. And then the mighty YouTube algorithm will take care of the rest. The more you dig, the more obscure and interesting and overlooked samples you'll find. I'm just gonna give you some of my favorite channels right now and put the links in the description box below. So shout out to Terminal Passage, 2666 The Art of Listening, Kuma's Campfire. These people are the best. Start from here and you'll find some true gems, I promise you. And in terms of licensing of these samples, Yeah, you're in no man's land really, because again you have to find the original owners and strike some kind of deal with them, or maybe use the ample samples as I said in the previous chapter. But again, if you want to have just fun, it's all worth it, because the internet is a magical place. It didn't exist 30 years ago, and now it's suggesting you Japanese albums from the 50s or something. So yeah, it's definitely worth a try. Let's go to category 3 now. Paid copyright-free samples. So these are usually samples made by musicians with just sampling in mind. They're not full albums, they're not full songs, they're just snippets of sound. The most famous resource for this kind of sounds is probably Splice, which I use quite a lot. Splice is a paid service. You pay a monthly fee, they give you credits in return, and with those credits you can download sounds. They can be single shots, drum hits, they can be loops, they can be musical phrases divided by instrument. The interface is quite interesting because it allows you to choose between instruments, keys, moods and genres and all sorts of things. Splice is definitely a great resource for high quality sounds that you can find and grab in a pinch and drop in your music productions without really ever worrying about, copyright infringement. Well, almost. You see, what sometimes happens is, if you find a particularly juicy loop that has just been released on Splice, some artists would actually, grab it and will use it in their productions, and they'll release it commercially, with copyright on it. So what happens is, if you then use the same sample and you don't slice it, chop it and pitch it down or up or mask it with effects, you can actually get a copyright strike from the guy you used it before. So you have to be really careful with these, because they're born as copyright free material. But if somebody uses them before you and you use them in exactly the same way, you might actually get a copyright infringement. The most famous case actually has to be Kendrick Lamar using this sample from this library right here. If you use that sample now, Kendrick Lamar label, TDE will come after you, I guess. It's all very complicated. In this category, we also find Arcade Output, which is a very interesting service because it's not only a sample library, but it's also a sample player, which you can use as a plugin in your DAW, which is a great thing, but also kind of a shame at the same time. Why? Why is it a great thing? Well, because the actual instrument is quite powerful. It gives you access to effects, slicing, sample mangling, you can pitch up and down, you can time stretch it, you can do lots of things. But if you want to use those samples in a hardware like an SP404 or something, it's quite convoluted because you have to bounce it and then put it in the sampler. Or maybe I just dump and I don't know how to use them with a sampler, but anyway, I didn't find a simple way to do it. So Arcade Output is great for DAW users, but maybe not as good for hardware users like myself. Loop Cloud is also a player in this field. It has a very similar interface to Splice. You can browse through samples and everything, but you do have to have the plugin to make it work, which again, it doesn't really work for me. But it's great for DAW users. And I mean, I use software myself as well, but having the accessibility to drag and drop sample into your SD card, it's a plus for me. So let's finally get to the category that you've been waiting for, which is category number 4, free copyright-free samples. And wow, these people are the true heroes of the internet. And there are actually quite a few resources that I'd like to shout out, so I'm not gonna stop and talk about all of them at great detail, otherwise this video will be an hour long. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna list them and then leave a link in the description box below. First one that I wanna shout out is a guy that doesn't get the attention he deserves, and this guy is NAS Kingston. Thank you, NAS, you're the man. Then we have Cymatics, which is actually a company that make great sample packs, mostly paid, but they have a huge free library collection, so go check that out. Looperman is also a great website with tons and tons of samples and sample packs uploaded by users. Similarly, freesound.org is a huge archive of free samples, and I've been using that service for 12 years now. But it is a bit more specialized in Foley sounds and effects and all that kind of stuff. But I found some true gems on that website, so go check that out. Another amazing service is pianobook.co.uk. This website is very interesting because it's all user-generated sounds, but all the sounds are very high quality. It only works with their plugin, which is called Decent Sampler, which I believe is a contact sampler or something. But again, the quality of these sounds is truly astonishing. Some people actually recorded, instruments that are so exotic you'll never find them, in your life, probably. So standard disclaimer, with all these resources, the free, copyright-free ones, read the terms and conditions carefully, because sometimes they do have some kind of Creative Commons kind of licensing, which, doesn't entail, paying royalties, but you might actually have to credit the original composers in your productions. Once again, CC licensing is very vast and encompasses quite a few different types of contracts. So I leave some documentation in the description box below, and please read it carefully. Bonus resource, and this is a gift for making it to the end of this very boring video. This is one of my absolutely favorite resources, and this is called the Internet Archive. This website is a huge source of inspiration because it doesn't only have audio, it also has video dating back to the 1900s. So you have all of these amazing old school videos and old school pieces of music that you can sample, and you make great beats out of it, as well as, maybe some music video to accompany it. And the reason why I'm putting it in this fourth category is because, copyright laws state that copyrighted material enters the public domain 70 years after the death of the author, and if the author is unknown, it enters the public domain 70 years after the date of original release. So, with work that's been made in the 1910s, I'm pretty confident that you find something that is completely copyright free. Alright, that pretty much does it, I think. All the links for all the resources that I mentioned in this video are in the description box below. Also, it's worth mentioning that, I do make copyright-free samples myself, and they're all on my Patreon page, so I guess that would be a category 3, because, to be a patron you have to, give me a little bit of money, but Also, if you don't care about my samples, but you still want to support me for the good work that I've been doing on this channel here, there's a Buy Me a Coffee page at buymeacoffee.com/bigumami. Thank you so much for watching. There's another video for you right here. And sorry if I had to be really quiet, but I am in a hotel room and there's people next door and it's midnight, so yeah. Okay, bye.